Hello and welcome to live Python classes by Data Science. Today we are covering list lesson 2. So in this lesson we are going to cover iterating through the lists. We are going to understand various ways in which you can iterate through lists in Python. And then we're going to understand the list comprehension, much hyped about list comprehension. We are going to understand it. We're going to explore all the variants of list comprehension in detail with code. And then the 5 problems with list, and then the tips and tricks by the master, and then the take home assignment, and then we'll conclude with code review tasks. So if you are new to the lesson, say hi in the comment section. Okay, let's get started with list lesson 2, iterating through list. So there are various ways in which you can iterate through list, right? What do you mean by iterating through list? So going through the list one by one, going through the list element by element. That is meant going through the list one by one, element by element. That means iterating through the list. So we can do it many ways. Let's start with one of the ways, which is index wise. We can loop through the list index wise. So in the lesson 1, we have already learned that indexes start from 0. So if we try to loop through index wise, let's see how it can be done. For I in range len ls, okay, print I comma ls of I. So we are looping through the list index by index, and then we are fetching the value at that index through this syntax. So at index 0, 1 is present, at index 1, 2 is present, so on and so forth. So in this way, you can loop through a list by index. Now, we have used a for loop here. We can do the same thing using a while loop. So let's do a while loop, while I less than length of list, print I comma ls of I and I plus equals to 1. So we have to keep incrementing the I so that we jump on to the next element. So let's run this, or this should be less than, right? Yeah. So 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4. Similar output, but a different loop, while loop. So we have learned how to loop through list index wise through a for loop using a while loop also. Now let's move on to element wise, right? Whatever I don't want to play with the index, I just want to see the elements. Pretty simple. For I in ls, print I. So this way we are just fetching the elements of that list 1, 2, 3, 4. For I in ls, print I. This way you can loop through the list element wise. Now there is one more way, enumerate, using enumerate. Enumerate is the preferred way by which professionals create loops. So let me show the magic of enumerate. For I comma j in enumerate ls and print I comma j. So enumerate loops over the list, but it also returns you the index. So I is the index and j is the element at that index. So you don't have to fetch the element specifically by using the index. Enumerate does that for you, right? So it's a pretty elegant way to create for loops over lists or strings or any iterable for that sake. But here we are talking about lists, so you can use enumerate and you can get the index as the element both, and you can play with them as you want, right? So you can say that enumerate is a combination of element wise as well as index wise looping. So generally professionals tend to use enumerate. Now here the index is starting from 0 in enumerate. What if I don't want to start the counting from 0? I want to start the counting from 1. So for I comma j in enumerate, ls start equals to 1. If there is a parameter in enumerate which is start, you can define the starting point, right? For I print I comma j. So here you can see it has started from 1. Now in this way it is not fetching the index. In this way it is just a number. But here, since it's starting from 0, it is the index, right? You can start from 1000 also, right? This is just a number, right? So enumerate provides us flexibility to start from any number that we want, right? And in this way, if you change the start, you can't say that this is the element at index 1000, because now 1000 is not corresponding to an index, it is just a number, right? And this is the first element, second, third, fourth. So when you want to play with the index as well as the number at that index, you need to start from 0, which is the default setting in enumerate. I hope this point is clear to you. Any doubts you can ask in the comment section. So far we have learned about iterating through a list using for loop, while loop, index wise loops, element wise loop, and using enumerate. Now let's move on and see list comprehension. So list comprehension is one of the most elegant way to create a list. Let's see how it works. So ls equals to I for I in range 5, right? So this will give me a list 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 5 elements in this list. So you see we have created a list with this syntax, right? So this is the syntax for list comprehension. You need to have the brackets, the square brackets that identify the list, and then there has to be a for loop inside it. There can be multiple for loops, but at least one for loop has to be there. So for loop, and the element that goes into that list comes here. So this is a simple syntax for list comprehension. Now let's make it beautiful. Let's add a conditional in that. So what if I don't want to have a plain loop? I want to have conditions also, right? So I only want to have even numbers. So ls equals to I for I in range, let's say 10, if and only if I is an even number. So in this case, we are adding a condition in the list comprehension at the end, right? Condition at the end. Keep this in mind. So for this is the regular for loop of the list comprehension, and then the condition. So this condition says if I is even, then add I to the list. So let's print ls here. You can see 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. All the even elements have been added with condition. Okay. So this is the condition at the back, right? You can have condition at the beginning also. So how can you have condition in the beginning? So let's just use the same list, and let me just bring the condition to the front. And there's a catch here. So when you are having a condition in the front, you can also have a else statement. Here, when you are having condition at the back, you can't have an else statement. So I will add I to the list if I is even, else I would add I square, right? For every odd I am going to add I square. For every even I am going to add I. So let's run this and let's try to print this. So you can see 0, 1, 2, 9. 9 is the square of 3, 4, 25, 25 is the square of 5, 49, 81. So you can have if else condition inside the list comprehension when you are using the conditional in the front. When you are using the conditional in the back, you can only have if condition. So list comprehension with nested loops. So I told you there can be multiple loops inside a list comprehension. There is no need to be a single loop. So you can have multiple loops. Let's try to build a list comprehension with multiple loops. I comma j for I in range 5, for j in range I. Okay. Now let's see what goes inside the list. So we have two elements, so we need a bracket here. So if you print the list, you can see this kind of a list, right? So you can have multiple loops in a list comprehension. That's what I wanted to show you. And so list comprehension is a very elegant as well as a very powerful way. You can have multiple loops, you can have conditionals, you can have conditional in the back, in the front, with else condition. So it's a pretty powerful tool to create list in a single line of code. So nested loops with condition. Let's try to make this more interesting. So this is a nested loop, and let's have a condition if if j modulo 2 equals to 0. I'm gonna only add into the list only if j is even. So let's try to run this. So you can say j is even in all the scenarios, and we have generated a list. So you can keep on playing with this. You can have loops, you can have conditionals inside the list comprehension. I tried to show you the possible ways in which you can use list comprehension in Python. Pretty elegant way, pretty beautiful way to create list. So we have learned two elegant things today: enumerate, which is used to loop over list in an elegant manner, and list comprehension, which is used to create lists in an elegant manner. So it's time to solve some problems now. Let's focus on the problems. Create a list of squares of numbers given a list of numbers using list comprehension. So given a list of numbers, ls equals to 1, 2, and 3. We need to create a list of squares using list comprehension. So this is the syntax for list comprehension: square for I in ls. So we have created a list of squares using list comprehension. Filter a list of numbers and collect only even numbers using list comprehension. So let's say ls is a list one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I need only the even numbers. So I'll use list comprehension I for I in ls if I modulo 2 is 0. If I is even, I will add that, and you can see all the even numbers have been collected. Now reverse a list using list comprehension. How you can reverse a list using list comprehension? Simple, very simple. I for I in range. We're going to start from the back of the list. Length of ls minus 1, 2, minus 1, and minus 1. So you can see we have successfully reversed the list, right? So here ls of I should come, and now the list have been reversed in a very correct manner, right? In a single line using list comprehension, we have just reversed a list. Loop over two lists simultaneously, print some of their corresponding elements. We will come to this problem after I tell you the tips and tricks. So let's move on to the tips and tricks by the master. Loop over two lists simultaneously. How can I loop over two lists simultaneously? So far we have seen looping over a single list. How can you loop over two lists together? So there's a very easy way using zip function. So let's define the two lists. ls1 equals to 1, 2, 3, 4. ls2 equals to minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, minus 4. Now I need to loop over these two lists simultaneously. So for I comma j in zip, I'm gonna zip these two lists together, ls1 and ls2, print I comma j. So you have seen you are seeing we have printed the elements together and we have zipped these two lists. In a single loop, we ran over these two lists. Now the second tips and tricks is search in a list in a single line. So let's say there is a keyword called success and I want to search that in the list ls. So ls has three elements: data science, success, and greatness. I want to search the keyword success in ls. So what I would do is keyword in ls. So it is telling me the keyword is not present in the list. Why is it so? So I think that it is to consider in the old list. So I want to search this keyword in the list ls. So I'm going to do keyword in ls and it's going to tell me if this element, if this word is present in that list or not. And it is present, that's why it is saying true, right? If I do something like define a new word, mohajo in ls, so it is not present in this list. That's why it is saying false, right? So you can use the in keyword to check if something is present in a list or not. Now let's come to the problem number 4. Loop over two lists simultaneously and print some of their corresponding elements. So these are the two lists, ls1 and ls2. Let's just create them, ls1, ls2. Right, and now we have to loop over them simultaneously and print some of their corresponding elements. So for I comma j in zip ls1 ls2, I need to print their sum. So print I plus j. So the sum of 1 and 4 is 5, 2 and 5 is 7, 3 and 6 is 9, right? Now the fifth problem, loop over a list and print index and the corresponding values. Very simple, we can do this with enumerate. So for I in ls, print I comma j and enumerate I comma, we have to print the index and the value at that index. So let's define the list ls as data science makes great tutorials. So data science is at index 0, 1 has the element makes, and great is at index 2, tutorials at index 3. Right? You can use enumerate to get the index as well as the element. So that's all for these problems. You have some take-home problems. Create a nested list, comprehension with conditional, run a loop simultaneously over two lists, and print out the elements at odd indices. And then you have the code review task. Visit this link and understand the code, and let me know your understanding in the next tutorial session. So that's all for this tutorial, guys. We learned about iterating through the lists in various ways. We also learned about list comprehension and to what extent you can go in list comprehension in terms of multiple loops, conditionals at the back, conditionals in the front, and thus list comprehension provides you an excellent way of creating lists in Python, and that too, it's a pretty powerful tool, right? Because it helps you do list comprehension with a lot of flexibility, multiple loops, conditionals, right? So use list comprehension as well as enumerate whenever you feel the need. Thanks for joining this session. All the best. We'll be back with list lesson 3 and cover more important and detailed concepts over there. Thank you and have a great day.